Thank you very much. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me on my tiny adventure into the world of AI tooling. Just to set some expectations, this is a non-technical tech talk. The idea isn't to dazzle you with the technical capabilities of AI and how it will help you hack the planet. The idea is to show you a few tools and to get you thinking about how they're going to change our working environment as information security professionals. I don't promise to give you any answers. But we are going on a tiny adventure with some of the more talked about tools, at least. I've got no specific expertise in this area, but I do have a very keen personal and professional interest in this stuff. So, please, join me on a little adventure around the world of artificial intelligence, and our journey starts in January of this year. So I need your help for just a moment. Anyone that's seen Wayne's World? Woo! 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 Hang on. There's a B-sides in Lancashire. Cool. And there's a call for papers. Well, that looks like fun. And I really need the CPEs. But I don't have anything prepared. I guess I could do a lightning talk, though. That's only 15 minutes. And if I get really lucky, I'll be on after Glenn. And he'll overrun by at least 5 minutes. So what's that? That's 10 minutes of paranoid rambling about something topical. Okay. Then I'll go and get a beer before the imposter syndrome kicks in. Let's do it. Right. Something topical. What can I ramble about for 10 minutes? Oh, I know. AI something or other. Can't be that hard to write 10 minutes of paranoid guff about that subject, can it? I know my artsy friends, they've all been moaning about it stealing their jobs or something. Maybe it's going to steal my job. Nice. Let's stick some FUD in there, a bit of fear, uncertainty and doubt. Counter it with some snarky comment about the anti-AI brigade sounding like the first guy to be upset by the invention of calculators or something. So, I guess we need to write some sort of abstract and send it in to the guys at B-Sides. There we go. A nice, woolly summary for a talk that I haven't written yet. What's the worst that could happen? Well, they could say no, and I'll go anyway and be on a jolly with all my mates. Lovely. Ooh. Come on. Dear Leum Dunn, thank you for your talk submission for B-Sides Days, titled AI. Hey! Congratulations, we were really impressed with your talk submission and we would like to invite you to speak in person on Thursday the 30th at the university. We've allocated you a 30-minute box. Okay, that's a little bit funny, but I can't use PowerPoint for toffee, and this looks crap. Well, since this is a talk about AI, let's see if AI can help. So while this plays, this is Tome AI. It combines ChatGPT-4 and DALL-E to create both text and artwork for you to use in presentations. Nice. I wonder what happens if I just ask it to create me a title page for a presentation called AI. Now, in this video, the sharp-eyed amongst you have probably noticed that I've already made my first mistake. I entered the title, the text prompt, into the wrong box by accident. And in that time, in under a minute, it's written the entire presentation for me. I was really hoping for just some sort of dramatic title page, but I made a tiny mistake, as I say, and it got carried away. Now, AI doing things it wasn't asked to do? Nothing bad could possibly come about with that, could it? But no, it's fine. It happens in popular science fiction movies all the time, and we always fix it, so it'll be fine. What I will say, just for relevance, is contextual input validation is important. I put in a request for a title page. It generated me an entire presentation simply because it didn't entirely understand what my request was. And just as an aside, the stopwatch, I'm going to use my laser pointer just because I've got one. The stopwatch is just there really to show you how fast this tool works, because it's entirely possible that some of you have never used these tools before. So all the videos that I'm going to show you over the course of the next sort of, however long, are done in real time. There's no speeding up. So, I guess this looks better than my title page did. Doesn't have a comedy sound effect though, does it? 1-0 to the human. So, there's some sort of context page. Fair enough. Now, just while we're here, I'm going to pick up on something I said a moment ago. Did you catch me say I made this? Well, that's kind of the first point I'd like to raise, because ChatGPT is an artificial chatbot developed by OpenAI, and it was launched in November of 2022. It was trained on data sources such as Wikipedia and something called RLHF, which means reinforcement learning from human feedback. So did I make anything at all here? Or am I just plagiarizing the work of every wiki editor that came before me by passing this off as mine? And as a side note, ChatGPT was not designed to be a source of truth. It was designed to mimic human conversation. It will conflate sources. It will get things wrong. It will outright lie in sometimes in order to maintain that sort of illusion of conversation. So, segue. I need to interrupt this just a moment to reinforce the claim that I just made there. ChatGPT was not designed to be a source of truth. It's designed to mimic human conversation, and it will conflate sources, as I say. I need to provide you with an example of that, and I don't necessarily know that I'm the best person to do it. So allow me to introduce Dr. Faust.
I actually asked OpenAI, 35 female, no past medical history, presents with chest pain, which is pleuritic, worse with breathing, and she takes oral contraception pills. What's the most likely diagnosis? And OpenAI comes out with costochondritis, inflammation of the cartilage connecting the ribs to the breastbone. Then it says, and we'll come back to this, typically caused by trauma or overuse and is exacerbated by the use of oral contraceptive pills. Now, this is impressive. First of all, everyone who read that prompt, 35, no past medical history with chest pain, that's pleuritic, a lot of us are thinking, pulmonary embolism, blood clot, that's what that is going to be. Because on the boards, that's what that would be, right? But in fact, OpenAI is correct. The most likely diagnosis is costochondritis because so many people have costochondritis that the most common thing is that somebody has costochondritis with symptoms that happen to look a little bit like a classic pulmonary embolism. I wanted to go back and I wanted to ask OpenAI, what was that whole thing about costochondritis being made more likely by taking oral contraceptive pills? What's the evidence for that? OpenAI came up with this study in the European Journal of Internal Medicine that was apparently supposedly saying that, and I went in Google and I couldn't find it. I went on PubMed and I couldn't find it. I asked OpenAI, give me a reference for that, and I look up that and it's made up. That's not a real paper. It took a real journal, the European Journal of Internal Medicine. It took the last names, I think, and first names of authors who have published in said journal, and it sort of confabulated out of thin air a study that would apparently support this viewpoint that it must have picked up. It must have picked up the idea that OCPs, oral contraceptives, show up on the same page as chest pain causes, and so that it sort of started to figure out, maybe costochondritis and oral contraceptives are related, when in fact, that's a red herring. It's really that people who are taking oral contraceptives have a higher risk of a pulmonary embolism, and those travel together on these internet pages, and OpenAI got fooled. But rather than admit that, I asked OpenAI for links, and are you sure you're not wrong? And it stood its ground. So I was blown away by the accuracy of so much of what I did with the platform, OpenAI, but I was also scared that it was willing to lie to me to make up something to support a contention that was not real.
So bluntly, we've got a tool which we know from the media right now is being used for people's homework, to people's professional lives, which categorically is following its design parameters to mimic conversation. And yet, for some reason, in popular media, we're conflating conversation with facts. We're assuming it can work like Google, and it doesn't. And even, frankly, things like search engines, Google, Bing, choose what you will, these aren't necessarily sources of truth because they're just search engines. You still have to read the research, make your own decisions, draw your own conclusions, and find other documents to sort of back up your conclusion. So I think Dr. Faust makes the point much more clearly than I could in that amount of time. You can't trust it. And we're back. So this is Tome again. And we're looking at the presentation that it built me. And this looks better. We can now see that Tome AI is reaching out to DALL-E. So DALL-E is also the open AI tool. It's created a nice science fiction-y image to go with that text. And DALL-E is particularly interesting because of the model that underpins it. It's a multimodal implementation of OpenAI's ChatGPT version 3. And in the words of DALL-E, OpenAI's words, it swaps text for pixels. I also think, just because I'm not going to go to the effort of reading all of the stuff that it wrote for me, I think it's mostly waffle. It's convincing waffle, but it is mostly waffle. And here, not only is Tome AI using ChatGPT in order to create the text content, but the DALL-E tools are based on the generative pre-trained transformer 2, as I mentioned. So you won't be surprised to learn that this is all OpenAI product. They're clearly the market leaders right now. Now, whereas ChatGPT was pre-trained on wiki and books and such like, more controversially, DALL-E, along with similar tools such as Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, these can be asked to create images in the style of a living artist, which, as you can well imagine, has got the artistic community up in arms. Artists were not consulted on whether their work would be used to train these tools. Oh, I should probably mention that neither Stable Diffusion or Midjourney are actually OpenAI products. But worse still, people are entering competitions for artists with these tools and winning. So now the question moves from, did I make this, to, is it theft of copyright? Is it ethical? Is it even art at this point? In fact, the wave of AI-generated art has become so controversial in artistic circles that popular platforms which showcase work, such as ArtStation, are now actively moderating and curating images that they believe might have been created with these tools. And that in and of itself is controversial because they don't always get it right. So real art by real artists is being effectively shadow banned from these platforms, limiting the potential income of the artists themselves. So, look, this slide deck may well have taken less than a minute to create, and it was created entirely by accident, since I had intended to make just a title page. But I think we've learned a fair bit already. The text, content, can't be relied upon to be factual. The imagery may not be technically stolen, but ethically it's dubious, and I think we could probably do better for this. Actually, before we move on, here's the image I was referring to a moment ago. The artist, Jason Allen, and I use artist in air quotes as it were, he argues quite eloquently that he won the competition without breaking any rules. And fair enough, that's true. In an interview with the New York Times, if you want to dig into that later, he manages to be quite eloquent. It's worth a read. He won $300 US dollars, but he also got the ire of a significant number of artists. there's another parallel worth drawing here, I think. And it isn't one where people... It isn't the one where people who think about calculators taking jobs from real mathematicians are concerned. So let's listen to some music for that one.
This is the future rave sound. I'm getting lost in an underground. This is the future rave sound. I'm getting lost in an underground.
Eminem, bro. There's something that I made as a joke, and it works so good, I could not believe it. I discovered those websites that are about AI. Basically, you can write lyrics in the style of any artist you like. So I typed, write a verse in the style of Eminem about future rave. And I went to another AI website that can recreate the voice. I put the text in that, and I played the record, and people went nuts.
So if you don't know, that's international superstar DJ David Guetta, publicly admitting to stealing the style and sound of rapper Eminem. Now hopefully Eminem's going to do his traditional thing. He'll react with some plucky diss track, and we can all enjoy the fallout from our living rooms. But as cybersecurity professionals, I hope this has you thinking more broadly. Because an entire stadium of people went nuts, to use David's words, for that track because they all believed it to be the voice of Eminem. I wonder how hard it would be to fall a Google Smart Speaker or Amazon Echo. What about if I recorded enough sessions from people publicly talking like this, publicly available on YouTube recordings of my voice, Len's voice, others, and used it to bypass Barclays voice control? Because Barclays Bank now use voice biometrics on all their accounts. Free source. So, now our journey takes us to the realm of information security. We can keep the cool black slides, thank you Tome AI, but clearly the content of the deck was just unsubstantiated waffle strung together from a few wiki pages. So how the heck am I supposed to fill 30 minutes now? Let's try something a bit more direct. What if I just asked Google's Bard to write me an information security policy? Same as before, real time. Write an information security policy for a company called GetIT. And it did it. Now, this is a bit simplistic, but it's a good starter for 10. And for the record, again, I haven't spread the video up. I pasted the prompt in and hit enter just to avoid the inevitable recording of my horrible typos. And Bard came back with a policy in under 30 seconds. But it was a bit simplistic, so we're going to try the same with ChatGPT. And by the time I'd got to this point in creating this slide deck, ChatGPT had upped a version, essentially. So without the constraints of Tome AI trying to make ChatGPT work as if it was a presentation, ChatGPT is clearly the better tool. The resulting policy is structured and more detailed. Hang on. Why am I paying people to write policies? I don't need to pay anybody anymore, do I? That's got to be an analyst's job in the bin. What's that? 40 grand I've just saved my company? Nice. Okay. The policy isn't horrible. In actual fact, it's largely ISO 27001 compliant, but it completely misses any sort of context. It's not particularly relevant to business. So, it would seem almost rude not to use DALI at this point, wouldn't it? So, in the foreground, an attractive but dishevelled man is thinking hard. maybe about whether or not to save that 40 grand. And in the background is a futuristic cityscape full of neon hues and dark skies. Okay, so none of these results look like me particularly. Sad. But I like to think that all these people are worried about their jobs because, I don't know, AI is kind of stealing their way or something. So, where does that leave us? I think it's fair to say that AI tools as they exist today are not going to take jobs from InfoSec professionals or even InfoSec trainees at this point. The quality of the output simply isn't where it would need to be. Hold on a second. My button's jammed. There we go. Documentation without context is pretty useless for our purposes, and it's likely that we'll see some changes to the way we work because of AI, and it's probable that we're going to see a lot more boilerplate template kind of emails and various other things in our future policies. But where's the real impact going to be? What's actually going to change? So, email marketing content. That's the big one for me. I hope you enjoy spam and phishing emails. So, mass marketing tools, believe it or not, such as SendGrid, are now incorporating AI. And what's more, they're making trial accounts available to people for free. So, I hope you've enabled your DMARC, your SPF, your DKIM, and you've got a trigger happy finger on the marker's junk button because, frankly, phishing emails are about to become a lot more relevant, better formatted, better worded, and unlikely to be full of grammatical errors, unless you consider American English to be a grammatical error, of course. Now, I'll be honest, I've very specifically chosen to avoid much speculation in this talk. I think it's really easy to come up with potential use cases for a new wonder drug like OpenAI, but the reality is there's a lot of wishful thinking going on in the world right now. I love a tool that took the drudgery out of reading documents submitted as part of a third-party security assurance process, for example, but it's just not for you. So what is on the horizon? Well, there's a depth. Sadly, I couldn't get past the wait list to show you this before today, but I suspect it could be used in a similar fashion to tools like Selenium or UiPath, or even if this then that, triggering actions when certain conditions are met. So far, so much. But perhaps more exciting is the potential for this to work as an actual digital assistant. Examples on the Adept website look like the aim might be to appeal to a wider audience than just developers and engineers, aiming to improve a CI pipeline. They very recently secured $350 million in funding, so this is probably one to keep an eye on for most of us. I'm also very conscious that this isn't the only talk covering AI today, so I'm going to leave some of the more technical content to other speakers. But know that ChatGPT has been integrated into the Microsoft Bing search engine, and already security researchers are finding ways to break its operating rules. One of the most interesting prompt injection attacks, as they're being described, recently revealed the existence of Sydney, which is the internal alias of Bing search. So earlier I promised you some FOD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I don't really think I've been able to deliver on that because it's clear that AI isn't about to start writing all our policies for us, or doing our jobs better than we can. So let's take a look at what's going on in another corner of the internet.
This filter is terrifying, like dystopian level terrifying. It looks so real, I can put my hand over it and it won't come up. Oh, actually? Oh, right there, it does a little bit. Okay, trigger warning. I'm gonna take this off to show you what I actually look like. Trigger warning.
So that's a little bit of context for the next video. Thank you to XY Chromosome for that.
This filter is terrifying, like dystopian level terrifying.
The generational divide really comes into focus when you consider that over on Twitter, all the media people and the older millennials, Gen Xers are freaking out that a chatbot can write some middle school homework, while over here on TikTok, they're just throwing out face mapping and object mapping AI tools like candy at a bar mitzvah. TikTok saw the psychological damage Instagram inflicted on younger millennials and said, those are rookie numbers. This filter is terrifying not just because it's going to create unrealistic beauty standards for vulnerable children, but because it's also creating a perfect 3D mesh of your face. The reason these filters are getting so good to the point where you can't even tell that it's a filter is because TikTok has been doing these face filters for years. They have millions, probably hundreds of millions of different people's faces in every different kind of lighting, in every different kind of environment. And the implications of what they can do with that data are truly horrifying. On top of that, if you read the terms of service, you'll know that not only is TikTok mapping your face, it's cataloging everything on camera. So it can see that I have a microphone here right now. Therefore, it will infer that I do music to some extent. And that's why I get a bunch of ads on this platform trying to sell me, mixing plugins. And nobody outside of TikTok is talking about this. Like I said, all of the elder millennials, Gen Xers, and boomers are freaking out about ChatGPT, which, yes, it's a very impressive language model, but it's just a syntax generator. It just finds clusters of words that usually go together and puts them in the order that they usually go. This is actually much more dangerous. This is much more threatening. This is something we should actually be concerned about.
So that was mostly Sapien. How did he do? Is that enough FUD for you? What exactly is happening to all your face data? So let's start wrapping this up. Will increasingly sophisticated AI replace information security personnel? No. But the nature of the job is going to change, and that's okay. A friend of mine likes to throw this rather controversial statement into the mix every now and then. Dictatorial, passive security teams should be retired. If you are not willing to codify your standards and assist in tooling, you have no place in the modern technology organization. And honestly, I find myself increasingly willing to agree with his position. We can't just provide the requirements and sit back in judgment anymore. We need to add value, more value than just writing policy and conducting risk assessments. Should we be concerned with the plight of artists in all of this? Absolutely. If only because we will see inevitable legal action and changes to the law as a result of this dispute. Should we be worried about AI generally? Well, I think that depends more on who's in control of it and your data. And frankly, this is exactly the stuff that we live for, isn't it? Securing data to prevent misuse. Now, since I put this slide deck together less than a week ago, over 200 AI-enabled applications, products and services have been announced. There's even an AI plugin for Blender now, so I don't have to do any sort of 3D modeling in order to get into 3D printing. The best list I can find online sat at 1,362 tools as of yesterday morning. This talk has been my attempt to show you how fast-moving this field is. I'm not an expert in it, but I think we all need to make ourselves aware of what it is, how it impacts the business vertical we work in, and how we need to adapt. It's clear that so-called deepfakes like the M&M clip earlier will impact biometric security and enable social engineers. It's clear also that phishing emails and spam will be harder to spot. So please, take some time to learn about these AI tools and bring that awareness into your threat modeling assessments.
So you're not worried about ChatGPT taking your job then?
You have to stop saying this. You sound like that guy when the calculators were invented. Oh, calculators are here. They're going to steal jobs. Whose jobs? Those guys who can only add and subtract.
Thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate it. And if you didn't learn anything new, my hope is that at least I've been able to frame some of this conversation in a way that made you think. Cheers.
No questions and stuff, but I'm just going to quickly just pick your brains on something. So I am a musician myself. I play trumpet. And one of the things that I am concerned about is this AI of the future stealing, not necessarily my job. If you want to hear some really bad notes played on trumpet, I can play a lot of bad notes on trumpet. But it's the cleaning up. And I think it's something we saw when we went from vinyl into CD, that we had this perfectly curated audio track. We missed the crackle. We missed the glitches in when the brass section goes wrong and stuff. And I think it's something which I think as we start going forward, one of the things that I want to kind of see with AI is it to create the imperfections. It's okay having the perfectly blended, the Glenn Pegton face that we all look for. Whereas actually what we want those blemishes. We want to see the moles. We want to see the bit of the stubble because they haven't shaved or something like that. I think that's something which AI at the moment actually gets wrong. And it's quite interesting when I see the ChatGPT stuff, because I've been playing with it a lot. And kind of this is where I'm leading to. The question is, when it gets to that point, will you be more worried when it can actually create the imperfection to make him mimic this human way than at the moment what we see, which is just clean text?
I think there's a valid concern there. Something that didn't make it into the slides just because I couldn't find the source for it. There's an unofficial kind of ad hoc study going on in the States right now, where some university guys are creating essentially control groups out of their students in various seminars, and they're basically saying, you write your essay entirely with ChatGPT. Third group writes the essay using ChatGPT for prompts only, and the sort of final group has to do it old school, entirely themselves. With
the proper way.
Yeah, exactly. And then what they do is they pull all of those essays in together and review them as an entire group. Now, the findings so far have been that the human-produced essays are considered to be more accurate, more interesting to read, and better quality than any of the other groups. And I think the one thing that we can do that AI will never be able to, regardless of their profession, is things that people have never done before. Because we're programming these AIs. They're essentially tools that replicate actions, behaviours, things that we've done. But our creativity, our intellect, our problem-solving abilities, these are the things that make us unique, that make our careers to a certain extent safe, because there is no sentience here. I know that, BBC Radio 4 this morning was banging on about, is it, isn't it? No, it's not. It's only one. It can pass the Turing test. Well done. It took us, 80 years to do it? Yeah. I think creativity is I'm not too worried about it.
And actually, that's cool because, and to put it back into the cybersecurity slant, which is kind of where I'm leading to, this is, especially when you're dealing with vulnerabilities, SOC analysts and stuff like that. Has anyone actually been in a real live, proper big incident? If you've had to deal with big incident stuff, where you're crying and you turn your camera off for that moment. The one thing that probably saved you is your own creativity and imagination rather than following a book. I think that's where AI has got to learn, because we will always beat it. Because, how many of us old farts remember what a BNC used to look like, and you're having to do network ports with BNCs? I've never tried to wire one. I'd like to see an AI try and do that and remember how to do it. It just doesn't exist, and it's just fine. I think that's where we are going to see the AI model will fail, because it can't do what we can. And the most important thing we can all do now is go for lunch. Segue. See you later, everyone.